Have you ever walked away from someone thinking they would always be there, only to discover, far too late, that they were already gone emotionally? Most people believe that ignoring an empath is harmless. After all, they seem patient, forgiving, understanding, and endlessly compassionate. They rarely raise their voice, they avoid unnecessary conflict, and they often give people chance after chance. Because of this, many mistake their kindness for weakness. But that assumption can become one of the biggest relationship mistakes a person ever makes. What most people don't realize is that an empath's greatest strength isn't how much they can endure, it's knowing exactly when to stop. Unlike people who react immediately with anger or revenge, an empath often remains silent while carefully observing everything. They notice the small changes in behavior, the broken promises, the lack of appreciation, and the emotional distance that others assume goes unnoticed. They may say very little, but they remember far more than anyone expects. Here's the surprising part. Studies in psychology suggest that highly empathetic people often possess exceptional emotional awareness. They can recognize subtle shifts in tone, body language, and intention that others completely miss. Yet despite this awareness, they frequently choose patience over confrontation because they genuinely hope people will change. This is why many people underestimate them. They mistake silence for ignorance and forgiveness for endless tolerance. But every empath has a limit, and when that limit is finally reached, something unexpected happens. They don't usually explode with dramatic arguments or seek revenge. Instead, they quietly withdraw. The warmth that once filled every conversation disappears. The emotional energy they once gave so freely is suddenly gone. To outsiders, it may seem like they changed overnight. In reality, that decision was forming long before anyone noticed. By the time an empath lets go, they have often spent weeks, months, or even years trying to save a relationship that the other person barely realized was falling apart. This silent transformation is one of the least understood aspects of empathy. Many people believe an empath will always come back because they've always forgiven before. But what happens when forgiveness is replaced by acceptance? What happens when someone who once carried everyone else's emotional burdens finally decides to put down the weight? And why do so many people only recognize an empath's true value after they've already walked away? These are questions that reveal far more than relationship advice. They uncover fascinating truths about emotional resilience, human behavior, personal boundaries, and the hidden psychology behind compassion. The answers may challenge everything you thought you knew about empathy, and why some of the quietest people can leave the deepest impact when they choose to leave. In this video, you'll discover why ignoring an empath can have consequences that most people never see coming, the hidden signs that an empath is nearing their emotional limit, the psychological reasons behind their quiet strength, and why those who take them for granted often end up carrying the greatest regret. Most importantly, you'll learn valuable lessons that can help you build healthier, stronger, and more meaningful relationships before it's too late. Stay with us until the very end, because the final insight may completely change the way you see empathy, kindness, and the people who silently give so much of themselves every single day. Welcome to Dr. Empath Psychology Hub, where we explore the fascinating psychology behind human emotions, relationships, and personal growth. If you enjoy thought-provoking content that helps you better understand yourself and others, make sure to subscribe and join our growing community. Let's begin to understand why ignoring an empath can have such unexpected consequences. We first need to understand who an empath really is. Contrary to popular belief, an empath is not someone with supernatural abilities or mysterious powers. An empath is a person with an unusually high capacity to recognize, understand, and respond to the emotions of others. They naturally notice emotional details that many people overlook. A slight change in someone's voice, an unusual silence during a conversation, or even forced laughter can tell an empath that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. This heightened emotional awareness often makes empaths the people others turn to during difficult times. Friends, family members, coworkers, and even strangers may find themselves opening up to them without fully understanding why. Empaths create an atmosphere of emotional safety because they genuinely listen without rushing to judge. They don't simply hear words, pay attention to feelings, intentions, and the emotions hiding behind those words. One of the defining qualities of an empath is deep compassion. They often place themselves in another person's position before forming opinions or making decisions. Instead of asking, why did they do that? They are more likely to wonder, what pain might they be carrying? This perspective allows them to forgive mistakes that others would struggle to overlook. Their patience comes from believing that people can grow, heal, and become better versions of themselves if given enough understanding. However, this same compassion can become a vulnerability. Because empaths naturally focus on understanding others, they often minimize their own emotional needs. They convince themselves that someone's hurtful behavior is temporary, that stress is causing the problem, or that love and kindness will eventually inspire change. Rather than walking away after the first disappointment, they continue investing emotional energy, hoping their support will make a difference. This is why empaths frequently tolerate poor treatment longer than most people. It's not because they fail to recognize disrespect or manipulation. In many cases, they recognize it much earlier than anyone realizes. The difference is that they are slow to give up on people. They believe everyone has a story, a struggle, or a hidden wound that deserves understanding. They keep offering patience even when their own emotional reserves are quietly being drained, believing that one more conversation, one more act of kindness, or one more chance might finally change everything. The breaking point rarely arrives without warning. It is usually the result of countless small moments that seem insignificant on their own, but become overwhelming when they happen again and again. An empath may forgive a forgotten promise, overlook a careless comment, or excuse someone who repeatedly puts their needs last. Each individual incident appears manageable, yet together they create a growing emotional weight that becomes harder to carry. While others may see only isolated events, the empath experiences them as a continuous pattern. Repeated neglect often affects an empath more deeply than open conflict. They notice when their efforts are no longer appreciated, when their kindness is expected instead of valued, or when they are only contacted during someone else's time of need. Emotional manipulation can make this even more difficult. Some people knowingly or unknowingly rely on an empath's compassion, using guilt, excuses, or emotional pressure to keep receiving support without offering the same care in return. Because empaths naturally want to help, they may remain in these unhealthy situations far longer than they should. As this pattern continues, subtle warning signs begin to appear. An empath who once responded immediately may take longer to reply. Conversations become shorter, enthusiasm fades, and the emotional warmth that once came so naturally starts to disappear. They stop sharing personal thoughts as freely, become quieter during discussions, and spend more time protecting their own peace instead of constantly solving everyone else's problems. These changes are often mistaken for mood swings, indifference, or distance, when they are actually signs of emotional exhaustion. One of the greatest misunderstandings about empaths is their silence. Many people assume that if an empath is not complaining, everything must be fine. In reality, silence often means they have already spoken through their actions countless times and feel that their words are no longer making a difference. Rather than arguing repeatedly, they begin observing. They pay attention to whether promises are kept, whether respect is shown, and whether genuine effort replaces empty apologies. While everything appears calm on the surface, important decisions are quietly taking shape within them, long before anyone realizes that the relationship has reached a critical turning point. The true impact of losing an empath is often felt only after they are no longer emotionally present. While they are still giving their time, attention, and support, many people begin to see those qualities as ordinary. Their kindness becomes expected rather than appreciated. Their willingness to listen is taken for granted. Their patience is mistaken for an endless supply that can never run out. It is only when that steady source of understanding disappears that the silence they leave behind becomes impossible to ignore. For the people who once depended on an empath, the emotional consequences can be surprisingly powerful. They may suddenly realize there is no one checking in after a difficult day, offering encouragement during moments of self-doubt, or noticing the hidden emotions behind a simple smile. The small acts of care that once seemed effortless are revealed to have carried enormous emotional value. Many begin replaying past conversations, recognizing opportunities where they could have shown more gratitude, more respect, or simply paid closer attention to the person who was always there for them. Genuine kindness is easy to overlook because it rarely demands recognition. Empaths often help without expecting praise or repayment. They remember birthdays, offer comfort without being asked, celebrate other people's successes, and quietly support those around them during life's hardest moments. These actions may seem small in isolation, but together they create a sense of emotional security that many people fail to notice until it is missing. Once that support is gone, relationships can feel colder, conversations less meaningful, and challenges more difficult to face alone. When people finally recognize what they have lost, rebuilding trust becomes one of the greatest challenges. An empath, who has reached the point of emotional withdrawal, has usually spent a long time hoping for change before stepping back. By then, repeated disappointments have reshaped the way they view the relationship. Words that once brought comfort may now sound familiar but unconvincing. Promises that once inspired hope may be met with quiet caution. Trust, once broken through repeated neglect or disrespect, cannot simply return because someone suddenly realizes the value of what they had. It must be rebuilt through consistent actions, genuine accountability, and lasting change over time, something far more demanding than a sincere apology spoken in a single moment. In the end, the greatest lesson is not simply about empaths. It's about how we choose to treat the people who quietly make our lives better. The individuals who listen without judgment, offer support without expecting anything in return, and stand beside us during difficult moments are often the easiest to overlook because their kindness feels constant. Yet, no amount of compassion should ever be mistaken for unlimited endurance. Even the most patient heart has boundaries, and even the kindest person reaches a point where protecting their own peace becomes necessary. Healthy relationships are built on appreciation, honesty, and mutual respect. They cannot survive if only one person is giving while the other is constantly taking. A simple expression of gratitude, a sincere apology, or making the effort to truly listen can strengthen a relationship long before it reaches a breaking point. Waiting until someone has emotionally checked out often means realizing their value when it's already too late. Empathy is a remarkable strength, but it should never require someone to sacrifice their self-worth. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it is a healthy act of self-respect. Likewise, respecting another person's boundaries is one of the clearest signs of genuine care. The strongest relationships are those where kindness flows in both directions, where support is shared, and where both people feel seen, heard, and valued. So, take a moment to reflect. Is there someone in your life whose quiet support you've come to expect instead of appreciate? Is there a relationship that deserves more gratitude, more understanding, or more respect before distance replaces connection? Sometimes the smallest changes we make today can prevent the deepest regrets tomorrow. If you found this video meaningful or thought-provoking, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Dr. Empath's Psychology Hub. Your support helps us continue creating content that explores the psychology of relationships, emotional intelligence, and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.